Good morning, everyone. In the last session, we are trying to discuss about the one of the important example here. So we created the license service here. So after creating this particular license service, now what we did basically, so here we are trying to communicate with the Docker related example here. Okay, so we created the Docker folder. So I deleted the Docker folder. So I'm going to recreate that. So basically, so I did some R&D on this particular Docker. So first, what we need to install this particular Docker desktop here. So to install this, what we can do? So we need to go to the Docker desktop for this particular window 10 here. Now click on this. So here you can see the option called so Docker desktop for window 10 here. Okay. So after clicking on this, now basically you need to enable the WSL tool here. Now this is the WS tool we need to enable for the Windows. So if you are not enabled, it will not work basically. Okay. So these two are the main changes we need to perform from this particular Docker perspective. So if you observe carefully, after this, now you are able to see this particular Docker related configurations here. Okay. So this is the Open JDK. So this one we are trying to use. So this one we are trying to use the OpenJDK here because in our example OpenJDK we are going to use it. With the help of this particular JDK file, we'll try to run our Java applications here. Okay, and images and so there is no container right now. So we'll try to create a one container to run our example. So to run this particular type of container, first what we need, what we discussed in the last session. So I will go to the pom.xml. So this particular pom.xml, not this. So this is the pom.xml. Now if you see here, we are trying to create a one Maven plugin and another plugin, we are trying to create a Docker file Maven plugin. So if you go to this, so here you can see Docker Maven plugin. Now if you see this, what is this? If you go to this, so here you can see the inactive. So because we already identified this section here, so this is the Docker Maven plugin. Earlier we used to use this particular Docker Maven plugin. So now this particular plugin, now it is not active here. Now you can see here they are trying to give the suggestion. So we recommend to use Docker file Maven instead of whatever we are trying to use this particular Docker Maven plugin. So they are trying to recommend here we can go for this particular Docker file Maven here. Okay, so this particular, the Docker plugin, now it is not usable here. So whatever we are trying to use, so this is inaccessible here. So this is the Docker file Maven. We can go for this particular Docker file Maven, and this is the current version we can use it. So here you can see 1.4.13. Get in the bin. So how we are going to use it? This is the configuration. So this is the plugin we are going to use in our pom.xml, and this is the Docker file configuration. This is the particular Docker file configuration. Now we'll try to use this particular Docker file configuration to build our applications here. Okay. So these two are the important information we need to identify. Now if you see this particular plugin configuration, so everything I copied and I pasted here. So if you go for here, so Docker file version, we are trying to use the 1.4.13 version, and these are all the two goals like we are going to build and we'll try to push into our local Docker here. And after this, what is your repository name and what is the tag we are going to provide. So after this, so this is the jar file we are going to use in our Docker environment here. Okay, here they are trying to use the argument of doc file. So this is we are trying to make here. So these two sections we need to identify. Here now you can see same thing. This is the plugin name. First one is Maven plugin, like a Spring Boot Maven plugin, and the second plugin this. So this is the second plugin we are using for our Docker file. So yes, everything is same. So Docker file Maven configuration. So this is the latest version. I did not modify any exclusions here. Now you can see this is the repository. So repository what I'm doing is so Docker image.name where I created under this particular property. So this is the docker.image.name. So what is the basically image name? Licensing service. Okay. And what is the tag we are trying to use? So project version. So what is the project version we are having? This one. This is our version. Okay. So now So this is the version, not this is the parent one. So this version we are going to use, so 0.0 dot hyphen snapshot version. Okay, now you can see. So these two we are going to provide here. After this, so this is the build argument. So once we build this, we are going to push this particular jar file, because this is the jar we are going to use here. So basically, this is the path here, the final project name. Now, what is expecting here? So they are expecting to create a Docker file. Getting the point. They are trying to create a Docker file. Now, what I will do, I'm going to copy this particular Docker file, and in our main location, I'm going to create a one file here. Okay, so I'm going to create this particular Docker file here. So after creating this particular Docker file, now what we need, so whatever we are doing. So here, if you see, they are trying to use the OpenJDK 8 here, but this is not the latest version. So what we did, latest version, if you go to here, Docker Hub. Okay, so here you can see, here we can go for the, so OpenJDK we need to use here. So this is the Python Redis. This is the OpenJDK we are going to use. So what is the latest one? So we identified in the last session the latest versions basically. What is the name we identified? So OpenJDK. So version we can specify here. So this is the versions we can specify. So what is the version we are going to specify right now? Whatever we identified in the last session, where we are having. So 20 is something we are able to see here. These are all the Oracle Linux related sections we are having. Amazon Coronto. So this is we are able to see. So 20 hyphen slim. Okay. So this is we identified in the last session we are going to use, because here we are trying to connect with the Java related, not the Linux related here. Okay. Now I am going to copy this, and so from this particular version. So after this, now whatever the changes we are having here, so we'll try to copy here. Now you can see, so maintainer who is the person name we are going to provide, so not required here, this particular person name, and the entry point we are going to take, and after this, so this is required here, the argument here. So we no need to add this particular library. So simply we can add these two here. Okay, so these two sections we can add here, and another one basically here. Okay, so instead of this particular adding, now what we can do, we can go for the copy here. So whatever we are having here, this particular section, now I'm trying to make as a license.jar. Okay, this is the project library we are going to use. Build the product.build.file name, whatever we provided. Now we are trying to copying into, because basically this will comes under the target. So this particular file I'm trying to make converting into the license.jar here. Okay, so license.jar. So after this, now what we identified here, we'll go for the expose. So this is the version we are going, like a port number we are going to use it, and after this we can go for the entry point. So where we are having entry point, this is the entry point. These are all the few changes. So simply we can make Java hyphen jar, and here license.jar. Okay, so these are all the simple files here. Now observe carefully. Open JDK, we are going to load the JDK related libraries, and we are trying to loading this particular jar file, so which is trying to load from the form file here. So this is the form file. Okay, so this is the form file. It is trying to load this, and now what I'm doing here, I'm trying to converting into this particular license.jar file. Getting the point. So after this, now what I'm doing is I'm trying to running this particular application in the port call 8080. So this is the entry point. So this entry point basically whatever we used in the last session, run dot shell command, whatever the run dot shell command, whatever we used it, now I'm trying to make inside this particular entry point here. Okay, so either we can go for the CMD or we can go for this particular entry point. So now we are using this particular entry point. After this, if you observe carefully, I created one more module here. If you see, so this is the Spring Boot microservice, and under this now I'm trying to create a license service. Getting the point. So earlier we did not create this, so simply we come up with a license service. Now what I am doing here, because all the microservices basically this will follow this particular structure here. So this is the parent application. So if you observe carefully in the parent applications also we are having pom.file. So this is the pom.file. Okay, so now you can see Spring Boot starter payment like a parent we are having, and internally Spring Boot hyphen microservices. Now what we need to identify basically is this is the parent to microservice internally. So we are going to have each microservice here. Okay, now you can see, so this is the module. This particular module is going to play a very important role. It will try to build the whatever the module we are having. Okay, so right now we are having only one module, so something like license service. So if you're creating multiple services, so we need to create a multiple modules here. Okay, and only we are having plugin information. So there is no, so like a dependencies related section here. So because this is the parent application, basically it will not do anything. So just it will try to add the module so that it will try to build the all the sub projects here, or we can call it as a sub module. Getting the point. So this is the main change I made for this particular Spring Boot microservice, and internally we are trying to create one module here. Okay, so now what we need to identify, this is the Docker file we identified here. So finally, now what I will do, I will go to the terminal. So inside this particular terminal, now what you can understand here, click on the Docker. So whenever you are trying to click on this particular Docker, you will try to identify the Docker related information. Now you can see here, these are all the Docker related information. So now what you are able to see, the Docker is installed. So how we are installing with help of this particular Docker desktop. Okay, this is one. But this particular section will work only on Windows 10 here. Getting the point. So this is one more important here. Now after this, so because of this particular Docker desktop, we are able to see this messages here. So he's expecting Docker options command. So these are all the option suggestions they are getting here. Okay, so you can see version, or you can see the debug, or you can see some context to sync. So host to log relay. So now what I will do, I will try to identify the Docker version. Now you can see, so this is the Docker version. So 20.10.17. Okay, so this is the Docker version we are having. Now what I will do, because of this particular Maven plugin, whatever the Maven plugin we are having, now if you see here, we added like a Docker and a Maven plugin here. So this is the Docker file Maven plugin. Now if you go to here in the Spotify, now what you identify here, so this is trying to provide here. So Maven package, so Maven Docker file build. So it will try to build this and verify you can identify, or you can work on the Docker file colon push. Okay, so finally you can go for the Docker deploy. So when you're trying to use this particular Docker deploy, basically what it will do, it will try to deploy into the application in the wherever you are trying to provide in the repository. So right now we are not going to deploy this. So simply we'll go for this particular Maven package here. So Maven package internally, it will try to build this particular Docker build, and it will try to push into the local repository. So now I'm trying to clear this, and here I'm trying to paste this Maven package. Now if you observe carefully, what happening internally, the Maven package, if you see, here we are able to see two sections here. These are all the different sections. Now what happens internally? Okay, this is the previous one. So now you can see application is started because of this particular Spring Boot, the Maven plugin. Now you can see this image is trying to build. So how we are getting this particular naming convention? So this naming convention we are getting because of here. This is the repository name and tag. So this is the repository name we are having, and this is the tag. After colon, we are whatever we are making, this is the tag section, and this is the repository name. With help of this, now we are able to construct the image. So Docker image we are constructing here. So after this, now you can see it's trying to make us a steps here. So how many steps you are having? 5 steps. So first, what is doing here? Now if you go to here, first step, it's trying to use the first command. Now if you go to here, this is the command from OpenJDK 20-slim. So after this, it is trying to pulling the library. So OpenJDK library, now it is pulling into the local, the Docker here. Okay, so this is the file section. Now it is filling here. Okay, after this, so image is updated properly. After this, now this is the second one. Now what we are doing is, so this is the argument we are able to see sections here. Getting the point. So what is the argument we are trying to load? Whatever we provided the build jar file. After this, now it is copying here. So third step. So it is the Docker is going to run on the port number this. And internally, now what we can identify, entry point. This is the entry point. After this, it is trying to build this. So this is the image ID. Now it is tagged to this particular, the version, whatever we are having here. Okay, so once everything is built successfully, now we are able to see one more jar file. So this will contain Docker related information. Okay, so here we are able to see 3 jar file section under this particular target. So now you can see, so this is the first one. Basically with help of Spring Boot we are going to build this, and second one with help of this particular Docker we are building this. Okay, now what we need to understand, in the local Docker environment, now if you go to the image, now you can see licensing service. In the local environment, now we are able to see this particular license service is available. So this is the tag we are providing, name and tag. So where we provided the name and tag, if you go to here, so repository and tag. So image ID, how we are able to see? So random ID 61 CI to some FI to B. Now if you go to here now we will able to see this is the image ID. Okay, this is the image ID. So this is the way of building this particular image ID. So when we created, less than a minute. Okay, now what I am doing here I am going to run the container, because so these are all the images are created. Now if you go to this, let me here only we can build this. So clear this. After this, Docker ls. So ls is not a Docker command. Now what we can identify, Docker ps. So now you can see container release. So basically these are all the ps command. Basically it will try to provide the list of container ID, image, command, nothing. So now what we can identify, so Docker image. Okay, he is expecting it. So pull, push, rm, save. These are all the image related sections here. These are all the image related commands here. Now you can see, use this particular Docker image, you can build this and you can identify the history and you can import and you can inspect this. So load, so ls basically what you are identifying is list of images. Now what I missed here, so Docker image, Docker image ls. Now if you try to provide this, here you can see, so first one is licensing service, first image, and second one is OpenJDK. Now whatever we are able to see here, licensing service and OpenJDK. In the container section, we don't have anything. Because of this, we could not get any container here. So because in the images we are having two images, OpenJDK we downloaded and another one is licensing service. So these two we are able to see here. First one is license service, second one is OpenJDK. Getting the point. So this is the way of identifying this particular images and container. Now what I will do, I am going to run the container. If I'm going to run the container, so here simply here you can click on this particular run. Getting the point. Here you can click on this particular run. After this, what is expecting here? You can provide the port information. So on which port we are expecting to run, we can provide this particular port here. So here by default port I'm trying to providing 8080. Okay. So after this, whenever we are trying to click on this particular run, now what happens internally, it will try to use this particular command, the export command here. So entry point command, it will start our Spring Boot application. Now if you see, after run this, so this is the container is running. Container is running. Whenever I'm trying to click on this, here, view details. So this is the Spring Boot is started. This is the Spring Boot is started. So whatever the Spring Boot we run application, now we are able to run with the help of this particular Docker here. So this is important section we need to identify. And if I'm going to provide the list up here, now you can see. So earlier we did not get the much information, but right now we are getting. So container ID, this is the image, and what is the command we are using? Java-jar, the license service we are trying to run here. Okay, so it's created 30 seconds ago. So now it is running successfully. What is the port? It is trying to run on the 8080, the TCP network port we are trying to run here. Getting the point. This is very important section we need to identify. This is the container. Whenever we are trying to create a Docker image, whenever we are trying to create a Docker image, we need to run this particular image on top of this particular container here. Okay. So this is the way of running. Now after running this, now what I am doing here, we'll go to the Postman. Whatever we identified in the last example, the same example we are going to run. So here only we are able to see. Now you can see it is running. The data, whatever we created, organization information, we are trying to load. So where we are trying to create, this is the license application we created. So something iPhone and the perm related. Now here you can see same information we are getting. Now if you understand this, so whether this particular request is received or not, how we can identify, here now we need to identify. Now you can see, so initialize this particular solid dispatcher solid, now completed initialization in the 1 milliseconds here. So this is the two lines of section we can easily identify, because after the started, these three sections is going to come whenever we are able to hit the request here. Okay, so finally this application is running with the help of this particular Docker here. So if you want to understand the Docker commands here, now what we can identify, simply you can click on this particular Docker help section. Docker, okay, so I created wrong here. Docker help here. Okay, Docker help. Now you can see these are all the list of commands. Getting the point. Now these are all the list of commands is going to provided by the Docker here. So now you can see here with help of this particular list of commands, we can identify how this particular Docker is running internally. So configuration, container related section, image related section, so plugin, so node related section, something. But most of the cases is not required. So DevOps engineers, they are going to identify more information about this particular Docker. But as a developer, so this is the file, simple file is enough here. But if you want to understand, if you want to create any folder, so we already identified in the last session, like make directory, create a folder. So the basic folder, basically how it is going to create here, if you observe carefully, all the folders are going to created uh, with help of this. So where we are having, let's see inside the image. So it's trying to use under the user local folder they are going to create here. Now you can see, so user local. Under the user local folder, this is the OpenJDK it's created. Getting the point. Now it is trying to set this particular environment, Java environment, it's set like this here. So if you want to create the any folder, your same thing you need to create. So user slash dot local. After the local, you can create your own folder. And if you want to add any some files under this particular your folder, you can create like this here. So make directory, you can provide this particular path here. Okay, so this is important. We need to identify. So any questions on this particular Docker related sections, whatever we identified? Okay, so if we don't have anything, now you can see, so with the help of this particular image, now what you can do, here we can push this. So you can push to a hub here. What is a hub? Basically, this is the Docker hub. Where is that? So this is the Docker hub. So using this particular Docker hub, you can push the changes. So earlier, I pushed this particular, so testing and configuration service, something Eruka service I created here. So with help of this, now what you can do, so this is the command you can use. This. So Docker push. So this is the name of the server name. We can uh, load this particular image and you can run locally, or if you want to use this into the like AWS or any cloud environment, you can use this. Okay, so this is the way of pushing this particular section here. Getting the point. So this is simply, so this particular Docker desktop, it will give you the without the commands here. So without the command, directly we can provide. So if we want to go to the command here, so we have a push related command here. Here we are having. Okay, now, so here I can provide the Docker push. So if you click on this, now he's expecting Docker push some options here. So what is an option? So you can provide the name and a tag. So it's like an image name and a tag. So if you understand more information, Docker push help. So it will give you the information. Now here you can see, so all the tags here. Now another important section. So it's trying to providing commands. So this is the additional command we can provide, or you can see push an image or repository or registry. So these are all the three options we can push into the Docker hub here. Whenever we are trying to use this particular push command, it will try to push your image into the Docker hub. So if you are not interested this, the like a command line, now here you can see, so go to here section, three dots, you can push here, or you can remove this, or you can pull this. Getting the point. So these are all the three options we are having inside this particular Docker desktop here. Getting the point. Now if you want to stop this, now directly go to this particular container. Now you can delete this. So the container, you can delete this, or you can select this, delete this. So anyway, you can delete this particular container. So container is now deleted. Whenever container is no longer available, if you send this, now you can see, so we are going to get some exceptions, sir. Could not get any response here. Could not get any response because the Docker container is no longer available. So if you go to the same Eclipse, IntelliJ, and whatever we identified, Docker PS. So no container. Container ID. So this is the syntax basically. If you are any containers are running, and below you are able to see the images. So the information we are able to see below. So right now we are not getting any container information here. Okay. So this is the important information we need to understand. So simple example we created the license services. So now we are able to run this particular example with the help of this particular Docker here. Okay, but now if you see, this is the main directory. Main directory is nothing but this is the Spring Boot microservices. So main directory basically it will try to identify this particular pom.file, and internally because of the module it will go to this particular pom. Because of the module whatever we provided here, so because of this particular module it will go to the license service module. Okay, internally it will try to create the Docker file information. It will construct it. Okay, so these are all about the So Spring Boot with Docker basic example we identified. Now we'll go to the another important section here. Basically, so whatever we identified now, where we are creating this particular configuration file, basically right now we don't have any configuration file. But imagine if you're trying to run our application more than 5 or 6 services. If you are trying to run your application more than 5 or 6 services, how we are going to create your configuration file here? This is very important. So basically, many developer, like whenever you are trying to build our application, so many developer, they will try to use the constant file. So constant file basically, it's like a application file, YAML file or property file. It will try to help you centralize a configuration file whenever one place here. Getting the point? It will try to centralize our configuration file here. So earlier, whatever the example we identified, we come up with the configuration files only. So if we observe carefully, if I'm going to provide the previous example, either the property file or we created under the configuration file. So if you're trying to create this is the two ways what we discussed in the last example. But what is the drawbacks we are going to get basically? So the problem basically here, we need to, if you modify something again, recompile, redeploy changes we need to provide. Getting the point? For example, here only you can imagine under this particular application.property file, if I'm going to provide some changes, what happened basically? We need to rebuild the application. If you are not rebuilding this particular application, the changes, whatever you added under this particular application.property file, it will not provide the latest information here. Getting the point? So this is the drawback we are having. So if we avoid this particular drawback now, what we can do? So we'll try to create the separate configuration information, because the configuration information, it is not going to depend into the our microservices here. Whatever the microservice, like how many microservices we are going to create, all the microservices basically, it will independently, it needs to access the configurations information. Okay, so this is the advantage. If you modify something, it will not affect it into any applications here. So we no need to recompile or we no need to redeploy the services here. Get in the point. But here, so if I want to use this particular changes, now what we can identify here? What we can identify? We can go for the one more service here. We can go for the one more service. So the particular service, we can come up with a YAML file or something like the property file, any one of the file, or we can go for the XML configurations also we can go for, and we can provide the whatever the configurations we are expecting here. Getting the point? So this is very important. If you observe, if you are trying to run our application in the server environment, what happened here? If you try to write the same application file, so again we need to stop the server, we need to restart the server here. So this is the one more drawbacks we are going to get when we are trying to work with the server related applications here. But now what we will do, we'll try to create a one more microservice here. With help of this particular one more microservices, we'll try to come up with a separate configuration server. Okay, so with help of this, now we are not going to dependent with any other services here. So if you are trying to build anything, if you are trying to modify your configurations information without stopping all the services, we can successfully modify the changes. So directly it will try to affect it into the all the environment here. So for this particular section, now what we will do, we'll try to come up with one cloud configuration server. The Spring Cloud configuration server we are going to provide here. Okay, so to create this particular cloud configuration server, now how I am going to create it? So here, this is, we need to understand here. So this is the main application we are creating. Under this, now click on this. Now here you can see module. So with help of this particular module, now we are going to create a one more microservice application. So each and every microservice internally, it will try to come up with the Spring Boot application. So it is fine to download from the start.spring.io. Now what we can identify here, configuration server. Okay, so configuration service. So this is important section we need to identify. After creating this particular configuration service, by default, it is selecting Java Maven and group ID. So what is a group ID we can provide? com.config. So artifact we can make as a configuration service, and this is the package com.config.configuration service. So Java, the package we are able to select as a 11. Okay, next here. So this is important here. Now, whenever we are trying to select in this particular dependencies here, this is very important here. Now, what are the dependencies we can identify here? So first we need to select as a cloud related sections here. So now let me identify cloud config server. So it is a client we are having, but we don't need a client. We need a server basically. This particular client we are going to use each and every other service. Let's see. Any server we are having here. So time leap, open authentication to. So here you can see. So server. Okay, Spring Cloud config. So here you can see the Spring Cloud config. We are able to see this particular section. Okay. Along with this, now what we can identify, we can go for the whatever the framework we identify, architecture framework. So this is also we can identify so that we can easily understand this particular sections here. Okay, Spring Boot architecture here. These two I'm going to add here. So after adding this, now directly we can click on this particular create. Now here you can see, so first one configuration service, second one is license service. So this is a help dot, the file by default is going to generated by the configuration service. So under this, you can see this is the file. So this is not required. I'm going to delete this. Okay. So wherever we are using. Okay. So basically, if you are interested, you can add any admin related file. You can modify whatever you are expecting here. Okay. But now observe under this particular configuration. So it is trying to import the changes here. But right now, what we need inside this particular module, so one more module we need to add here. So it is trying to import the Maven project. So we need to wait. Okay. So module here, configuration service. So this is the way we need to add all the modules here. Okay. Now we added this particular configuration service as well as licensing service we added. After this, now we'll go to this particular configuration service form.xml. So if we observe carefully, this is we already identified parent section. Now this is the property section. And now you can see cloud configuration server. But here, this is the Spring dependency, test related dependency. But if you observe carefully, this is important. Under the dependency management, we are having one more dependency. So this is the cloud related dependencies here. Getting the point? So these are all the cloud related dependencies. So because we are trying to create a one configuration service, the configuration server basically it will try to use the cloud related sections here. So now, so one artifact we are using Spring-cloud-dependencies, and this is the version. So what is the version we are using? Here you can see under this. So Spring-cloud.version. So 2021.0.4. This is the latest version of this particular cloud here. So under this, now we are able to see this particular cloud's config server. Okay. So this is we are going to use it. After this, under this particular SRC, we'll go to the main Java configuration server, configuration service application we are having here, and here we are going to use one annotation here because Spring Boot come up with all the annotations here only. Now if you see the first dependency what we are doing here, let me go to the dependency first. First dependency here we are trying to use a config server. So this is only the main dependency here, because this is the first dependency we are discussing here. Now what is doing here? It will contain the server related, the cloud server related core libraries here. So inside this particular core libraries, now we are going to use the one annotation. So what is the annotation we are going to use here? The annotation basically enable config server. So here you can see we are having enable config server. So from where it is coming, you can read this particular package. Basically, this is the Spring framework related one. But here now you can see under the Spring we are having cloud related section. So this is the cloud. org spring framework dot cloud dot config dot server. Enable, we are trying to enabling this particular config server. Okay, so this is the annotation. So now internally, if we want to understand this, so what we is expecting, config server configuration class. By default, is expecting config server configuration. So we already identified this particular import here. Whenever we are discussing this particular Spring related example, we already imported. Like import is nothing but if you are trying to, so like we can identify database related configuration we created separately, and some security related section we created separately. If I want to merge into the one file, we can go for this particular import, we can merge. So it's nothing but the enable configuration server is now able to access this particular config server configurations information. Config server configuration related sections here. Now if I'm going to show you this particular config server section, it will try to identify the configuration related sections here. So instead of doing this, we'll click on this. Now you can see these are all the imports here. So it is a one constructor, config server configuration, nothing is there. So one bean they are creating. What is the bean they are trying to create here? Marker. Okay, so this is the marker class here. So this is the default configuration they provided. If you want to override, now what you can do, so you need to exclude this particular class we need to exclude, and we can create this particular section of class here. Okay, right now we are going to use the default configuration is fine. But what is the purpose of this particular configuration file, or like a configuration service we are using? It will try to create the different files here. Getting the point? It will try to create the different file sections here. Now we'll identify this particular different file, how it is going to create. So now what we can identify, we'll go to the under the resource. So we can go for the config folder or whatever we want to create this. So under this particular resource here, I want to provide one more information here. Basically, this particular resource, so this particular resource basically now it will contain the one more folder. If you are interested to create, you can create. So now I'm trying to create one folder call, like it's like a directory called config. So either you can create a file under the resource, or you can create under this particular configure. So here now what you can create here, whatever the configurations file. So right now, what is the application we are having? First application we are having something like license service. So now I'm trying to create this particular folder, one more folder, something like licensing service. Okay, under this particular licensing service, now I'm going to create the file. So the file here, either you can go for the property file or you can go for the YAML file. Now we'll try to discuss about the YAML file here. Now how we can create this particular YAML file? So application name I'm trying to create here. So licensing service -dev.yaml file. Licensing service -dev.yaml file. So one more file I'm going to create here. So if this is the prod. Okay. Now you can create prod is nothing but production file. So one more file if you are interested to create, default one. This is the default file. These are all the three files I created because in the real-time scenarios, so this is the same format we are going to use. So production related, some database we will try to make differently, and something like deployment related and So like in the development section, we are going to create different configuration file. Now, so if I'm trying to providing this default one, so default one, inside the default one, now what I will do, so something like example dot property, like otherwise env dot property. Okay, env dot property. So something like environment property. So what is the environment? Now we are under the default environment. Okay, so default environment. After this, now what I will do, after this, now what I will do, here I want to provide the database related sections here. Okay, so database related section. Now, so what is the database related section? So Spring dot, now it is not loading because of the web starter is not available. So we'll identify this. Let me identify cloud starter config. Is there any way to load the starter files? I want to add one more starter here. Open module setting. Artifact, nothing, facet library. Okay, so I think directly we can go for here. So I try to identify later that Maven repository. Under the Maven repository, what we can identify cloud starter config. So I want to use these two sections here. Okay, so after this, now what I will do, we'll go to here. So Spring hyphen whatever we added inside the license.service. Spring dot jpa dot database. Okay, so I want to provide the database related sections here. And here, what is if it is a property file, right? So Spring dot jpa dot database we are trying to providing. What is the database we are going to use here? So something like a Postgres database. Postgres SQL. Okay, so this is the database we are going to use, and I think not required this double quotes. Okay, PostgreSQL. After the Postgres database, now so Spring dot show SQL. So I need to make as a true, and Spring dot data source dot driver class name. So what is the driver class name we are going to use? org dot. So let me copy from here whatever we used in the earlier example. This is the driver class name. Okay. Okay. So instead of, maybe it is not available, because of this it is getting an error. So Spring dot data source URL, data source URL, and this is the URL. Here I'm going to provide the, so something like microservice. Oh, after this, Spring dot data source dot username, Postgres. Spring dot data source dot, where is the password? Password. Okay, so this is the password. Postgres. Now these are all the database properties. Now I'm going to paste it here. Why we are getting this invalid child element? Okay, is expecting the child element instead of doing this, because it is a YAML file. Whatever we created, that one is a application property file, but this is we are trying to create as a YAML file. So because of this, we are getting some errors. Okay, so this is the way of creating this particular default. Now what I will do, I will copy this same section and I will paste it under the dev. Here I'm going to make as a dev and production. So this is I'm going to provide as a prod. So database is same. Just for understanding, I'm trying to create this. Getting the point. Now after this particular section, now what we can identify here, we'll go for the, after creating this particular, the three sections, so like a dev environment, production environment, and a default one. After creating this, now what we are going to provide here, we'll try to provide the class here. So whatever we provided here, so simple is fine. Configuration server, whatever this particular enable configure server. Now what we will do, so here we are going to create a default sections here. So under this particular resource file, we need to provide the one more file. So that is called application.yaml file, or you can create bootstrap.yaml file. Anything you can create here. So if you create the bootstrap.yaml file, it will go to the highest priority. And if you are creating the application related section, it will the second priority. Okay, so these are all the two sections. Application.yaml file. So this YAML file basically, it will contain YML. So application.yaml file, here I'm going to provide server.port. Server.port, where we are having, okay, so 8888. So this is the application server. So I'm trying to run in the 8888 port. So after this, now what we can provide here, we can provide the profile here, because we are trying to creating multiple sections here. So Spring dot profile, where we are having active. So what we can provide? So here we can provide the Spring profile active. What we can identify here, we can provide the default sections here. So something like so native I'm going to use. So later we can change like a production as well as dev. Based on this particular profile only, it will modify the changes. Getting the point. This is important. And another important section, now what we need to identify here, whatever we are trying to creating here, so this is very important here. Path here, so configuration path. Here only. Here, so when we are trying to create this particular YAML file, we need to be very, so the path is important. Whatever the path we are creating. Now you can see server is topest and port is the second path. Now you can see same way Spring, so profiles and active. So this is the format. But if you go to the property file, whatever the property file we created, oh, remove this. So it's simply, let's see, Spring dot profile active. So it is equal here because of this particular property file. But whatever we are creating, that one is a YAML file here. So these are all the syntax we need to identify very clearly. Now come back to the YAML file, so application.yaml file here. Now here, so Spring Cloud, here we need to provide the config server. Cloud dot, where we are having config server. Cloud. Spring dot cloud dot config dot server dot, so native. And here Spring Cloud code dot native, add label location, default label, native order, search native version. And here search location. So this is, we need to add. Now you can see how we are able to see this particular path here. This is important section. And after this, now what we are going to provide here, we are going to provide the where this particular configuration file we are having. Getting the pen. So where we are having this particular file. So because of this particular file, now if you are trying to use the local file, we can provide this. Getting the pen. Local file. Now here only we provided this. So because of this, now what I'm doing, I'm trying to providing this file. So copy reference path, absolute path. Here I'm going to paste this. If you see, so this is the path is available. So Eclipse Workday microservices, and this is the configuration service. Under this particular configuration service, now what I'm doing here I'm trying to providing license service is a folder. Under this particular license service, this is the default one we are able to see here. Okay, and if you are trying to use, this is the default section we can provide, but this is not also applicable because, so again, if I'm trying to use here, what happens internally? If I want to modify something production related or development related, so configuration service we need to stop and rebuild this application. We need to start and we need to rebuild this. So first we'll see how it is going to work. Later I will modify how we can load the data from the different environment here. So now just simply I'm trying to run this particular configuration server. Oh, we need to enable this because we created one more module. Okay, let me start this. Could not find the load. Oh, sorry. So not this. So this is, we need to run from here. So configuration server application we need to start. Basically, I started different applications. So because of that, it is not started here. Now you can see if everything is goes successful, it will start here. Here now you can see started this particular configuration server. Okay, so this is the configuration server is started. Now what you need to understand here, getting the point. Now what you need to understand, the configuration server is identified here. Now later we'll try to modify this. So using this particular configuration, whatever the configuration we created here, using this particular configuration, now we are going to run our license service here. Getting the point. Now we are going to run our license service. So to run your license service, what we need basically, we need a database related jobs here. The dependencies we need here. So now observe carefully. I'm going to create a one more file here. So I want to stop this because configuration server is running successfully. Here, one more file. So this is a one more file. So because these are all the files, it is introduced in the Spring Boot here. Now you can see bootstrap file. Okay. So bootstrap.aml file. So either you can create the bootstrap.aml file or you can go for the application.aml file, or you can create the bootstrap.aml file and application.property file. So the bootstrap.aml file is going to take highest priority compared to the application file here. Okay, now here, now what I'm doing is simply I want to create the name of the our application. So spring dot application name here. So spring dot application, because of this particular YAML, this is the format we are getting. Because of the application property file, the format is little different here. Now what I'm doing it, so simply config server. Okay, or we can go for the configuration. So configuration server. Why I'm getting this error? No, we cannot give the space. I think it's fine. Config server. Okay, we can use this particular config server. Now you can see first highest priority is going to taken by the bootstrap.aml file. Later it will take application.aml file, and later if you add anything under this particular application.property, it is going to take third priority here. Okay, AML files will take first priority. Later application file, application.property file will take second priority. Now we created the one configuration server. Configuration service basically what it will do, it will try to identify the whatever the configurations property. For example, right now we are having only application related. So where we are having this is the database related section we are having. But in the real time scenarios, not only this, we are going to have lot of configuration. Your application is depends on the third party libraries. Getting the pen? Third party libraries. So for example, so this is the database, and the transaction related we can add, and email related we can add. So something like security related we can add, and other things like if you are trying to provide any SMS related configurations, we are going to add some caching related configurations we are going to add here. Getting the point? So lot of configurations we are going to add here. If application is trying to depend on the third party libraries, all the configurations will go into this particular property files or YAML files. Now using this, we are going to insert the data inside the our login service. Now what we need basically, the first step. The first step basically here we need to identify.
You defined one is the AML, the application is YML. Is that both are same or?
So same only. Okay, here. Okay, so it is mistakenly I defined it. So basically it should be YML only. Replace this file with refactor, rename. Extension, we can create this. So dev. Okay, so we can modify it. Now we'll go to the yeah.
The microservice is the database, right? Do we have, or it's going to how that we gave the local host by the microservice?
Yeah, we'll create later this. So right now we don't have any schema, so we'll create this. Whatever the database we want to create in the Postgres, so we'll create. But we'll see. So up to we need to configure the changes here.
Thank you.
Okay, so coming back to here, now what we are doing is, so here we are trying to run this particular configuration server. After this, now we'll go to the license service. So under this particular license service, now what we need to identify, First, we need to identify this is the license service. Yes. Okay. So here we need to add. So web is already there. We need to go to the Maven repository. So data JPA. So data JPA we can add. After data JPA, now what is the Postgres one, right? We'll copy from here because we already provided here. This is the Postgres one. Okay, after this, now, so one more important information we need to add here. So here we need to add the client here. So whatever the client we earlier identified, the client we need to add here. So when we are trying to create in this particular configuration service, we identified the server and the client here. So server we added in the configuration service. Now we need to add the client inside the license service here. Okay, so now I'm going to add this. So let me remove the version section and we'll go for the again Maven repository cloud client here. So this is the client we need to add. So observe, this is very important. The client where we are adding under this particular license service, not in the configuration service. So let me remove these versions also. Control Shift Alt L. Rearrange the code. So the code is in rearrange mode only. So it is importing the files here. What is the error we are getting? Okay, he is expecting the version. Let's see what is error. Click to enter, convert the seed date. Okay, maybe this one is already downloaded, I hope. Why we are not able to see the client? Let me comment out this. We'll see. Okay, so client only it is failing, I hope. So Apache, the failure was okay. Let me refresh from here. Okay, so why we are able to see this? Oh, got it. Now, basically, this will not download from here. We need to add where is the dependency management? This is we need to add here. And version. Under the property, we can add this. Okay, the sync is completed. Now, let me enable this Postgres. Okay, 42.36. What is the latest version? Why it is taking 42.6 only? Okay, I think we can use. So later we can see if we get any exception. Now we added this particular three sections. So first one is data JPA, so both Postgres related and client. So after adding this particular three section, now what we need here, again we need to go to the another important section here. We need to add the port, whatever the application is, the configuration information is running, we need to provide the URL. So where we need to provide this particular URL, under this particular our property file. Okay, either you can go for the property file or you can go for the any YAML file whatever we have created earlier. So this example now, so same thing I am going to create here. So I am trying to, okay, we'll keep here only. So instead of modifying all the changes, so directly we can create the, so first one is spring dot application name licensing service. Okay, and after this spring dot profile active. So we can go for the default one, and after this spring dot cloud we can provide cloud config URI where we are having this. So URI, what we can provide, HTTP colon localhost 8888. Okay, so this is the URI we are trying to providing, the configuration service is running. Get independent. So this is the API, like IP address of this particular configuration service. So now whenever we are trying to providing this information, what happens internally? First, the license service, it will try to communicate with this particular configuration service. It will try to load the data from the configuration service. Now after this, what are the other changes we need to add basically? Now here you can provide additional changes here. Create a configuration file, license service, go to the Java control, not controller model. So here entity and a table. After this we can go for this particular ID section. ID, so generated value status, here we can go for the sequence here, and here I can go for the column. Okay, so these are all the changes. Now we added. After this, now what we will do? So whatever we are creating here, now we'll go for the repository. Directly, I'm trying to create this particular repository sections here. If I'm going to provide class, we can take interface only, we can take here something like, so license repository, and we'll go for the extents. We'll try to perform the CUD operation. So CUD repository, type license and ID. So ID, what is an ID we are having in the license? String only, right? Yeah, it's a string. We can go for the string. So this is the interface I'm trying to create. Repository. Now what we will do, we'll try to identify the methods here. Public here, Find by all ID, find by organization ID. Find by organization ID. So this is fine. So one method and another method I'm going to write public license here. Let me copy this. And license type we are having, right? So what we are having, instead of license type, we can go for the license ID. Okay, and ID basically it is giving the organization ID. Okay, so this is fine. So he's expecting two parameters. First one is organization ID, string license ID. So these are all the two methods we are having. So with help of this particular two method, we'll try to create the class here. Okay, so license service. So I created repository. We need to move this particular file into the repository. Make package. What happens? Does not exist to the set package name to this. Okay, so I forget to create this repository package. Now, repository I created. So after this, whatever we created, I move into this particular folder. Okay, after this here, I'm going to create one more package, service. License service. First, we need to make service annotation. Public license service this dot repository is equals to license repository. Auto-write. So after this, now what we can write here? We can go for the two methods. Whatever the two methods we are having. Public license get license. License ID. Okay, here return repository dot organization ID comma license ID. Okay, so this is we created. So first we'll try with one method, later we can identify the another method. Now what we can identify, so controller. So inside the controller, now we can go for the, so here I'm going to provide the organization ID and license ID. So I'm going to comment out this. Simply we can create the private license service, public license controller, license service. This dot license service is equals to license service AutoWire. Okay, and now what I will do, I'm going to comment out this. So we'll try to load the data from the database. So return license service dot get license, organization ID and license ID. Okay, so this is we created. Now what I will do, I am going to run these two servers first. So we'll identify if you get anything. Okay, so before going to run this, now I want to identify the service config. Okay, so service config, we need to create one component section. So here in the model only I'm trying to create a one config. Basically this particular class, sorry, not component. Component I want to create, and here provide string here default property. Whatever the property we created. Okay, so default property, and I'm going to use value annotation. So this particular value annotation, here I'm going to provide the environment name. So let me go to the licensing service, env property. This property will load the value. So now after this, so here, so data setter I'm going to provide, and getter. So we need a one constructor. I think not required this constructor. We are making component, so it will create an object. Okay, now what I will do, this particular property we are going to print here. So where we are trying to print here, so inside this particular where we can print in the service, we can print here. Okay, so we'll try to print this particular service, or we can go for the, okay, instead of printing this here only, I'm going to write where is the license service. So service config, service config. This dot service config is equals to service config. Okay, and here, so just for understanding, now I'm going to print here this out here. Okay, and here service config dot default property. So the default property from where we are trying to load, we are trying to load from the configuration service. So if you see license service dot the property, whatever the message we are having, this is the message we are going to get, default env. Okay, so that we can identify this particular properties are now loading here. So this is we created. Now I'm going to run this. So with it's test, right? Configuration first I'm running. Later we'll try to identify the license service. Okay, so here you can see time card is started on the port call 88. Now we need to go to the license service. So this we need to run. Oh, some classes are reloaded. No spring config dot import set. Here we need to identify no spring config dot import set. Why we are getting this? From where we are getting this? Refresh environment is expecting anything. Prepare event to multiple event lambda environment to prepare environment. Okay, spring config add property univer configuration. Okay, is expecting add this. Or you can make the check enable. So he's giving some suggestions. So anyway, we'll try to run this. Now again, I'm trying to run license service. Now we are getting file extension not know if any property source loader. Okay, this is the file related we are getting. Unable to load config data from the config server. Get refreshes. Okay, let me add refresh also here. Where is the file license service? So it will try to refresh this. No. Unable to load the config data. So config data environment. Spring application run listener. Illegal state. Okay, now what I will do. So instead of loading this particular file related, maybe is expecting file extension is not no to any property source loader. If the location is meant to slash the file separator. Let's see what we are missing in the config server. Basically, this is not loading properly. Okay. Here we provided correct path only, right? License service dot. Okay. So it is we replaced with the YAML. Now I modified the changes. We need to stop. Two applications we need to stop here. Where is configuration one? So configuration one also we need to stop. Let's see here how we can identify two services. It is running or stopped here. Okay, configuration is started. Now finally, I'm trying to run license service. Again, we are getting same one. Okay. Spring Boot context config standard config data resolver is not known to any property source loader. Okay, let me take the help from the Google. So what we are missing? Maybe it is missing because of that. YAML I am thinking. We'll see. No, I think this is not. We added the import here. So config server, config import we added right here in the license service. Maybe is expecting the path. Okay. Optional colon. Let me add this. Okay, let me run one more time. Okay, so he's expecting URI. Fail to configure database URI. So database URI where we provided, basically we provided the URI from this particular configuration service. So configuration service is running or stopped here. Okay, it is stopped here. Let me run the configuration service one more time. Okay, so it is running. Okay, so URL, it is not loading. Failed to configure the database URL. Attribute is not specified on no embedded data source. Basically, this information we are trying to load from the configuration service. So maybe this is one not loading properly. License service and so fetching the configuration service. It's trying to load successfully. Profile is set to default. Okay, if it is default, bean factory ID application is started. One following one profile is active. License service. So what is the profile is expecting here? Native. Okay. Computer is running. So why the license one is not loading? Maybe it is not loading this particular file, I guess. I think we are missing config.license service slash license service.ml. Okay, whatever we provided, correct only. So, okay, let me try. So instead of loading from the localhost, if we are having issue, now I will give the GitHub related URL here. So we'll try one more time from the GitHub URL. We'll identify so whether it is going to load from the GitHub URL or not. So to give this particular GitHub URL, now what we need to provide here? First, we need to go to the so here I want to provide the GitHub related connection. So the GitHub related connection Spring Cloud server dot. Okay, so for this particular get URI, where we are having this particular URI. Okay, to give this particular URI, not this. Okay, what we are having, I think config server. Okay, so I'm going to add this. So later we can modify the changes, but now you can see this is I'm going to use config server main application dot properties. Okay, after URI, we need to provide the username and password. So for this particular username and password, I will go to the configuration. Here I am going to copy. I think application dot property only I provided. Let me copy these three sections. Now, what we are trying to provide here? So something config server. After the configuration server, now we need to add a default label. Okay, after this, after configuration server, encrypt to enable. Okay, so these two we are going to add, and we can go for the default one here. Let's see. Whatever I configure here, so same information. So whatever we are trying to see, I am going to modify the changes here. So GitHub is very slow. Config server, application.properties. Here I am going to use. So here I am trying to modify username and password. So Postgres. So remaining everything is same. Let me commit. Modified the what we modified here. So username and password URL. So modified the URL. Okay. So now come back to here. Default environment. Everything is same. So now we are not going to use this. So directly go to the application.yaml. Okay, application.yaml. So application.property, nothing. Now let me run this configuration service one more time. Okay, so we need to identify adding the property source, whether the file is loaded or not. Where is having? Okay, anyway, now we'll run the license service. We'll see what kind of the exception we are getting. Okay, so now you can see, so microservice, the data source is whatever the database. So earlier, so sometime basically this the local files will not load successfully. So because of that we are getting an exception. But now if you observe carefully, I configure the GitHub related URL. If you see here, these are all the GitHub related sections we have. So I modified the changes database related sections here. Okay, so these are all the database related sections here. Now what we need to create the first database inside the Postgres. Now I am going to create one more database. So the naming should be same. Microservice. Microservice I'm trying to create here. So database is created. Okay. Now what I will do, so we can go for the new connection. So Postgres, click on next, and so database name Postgres. So database name now I created as a microservice. So password Postgres we are providing. So click on the test connection. Connection is successful, connected here. Now click on finish. So once we click on finish it, so we are able to see the microservice related sections here. Okay, so microservice database we are having schema. So schema also we are added here. So if you go to section, here we are trying to use the schema. So instead of HB, now what we can do, so I will modify the schema here. So what is the schema we can provide? The schema, so what is a service we are trying to use? Microservice schema we can create or different one. So right now I'm trying to create a license, or we can go for the application level we can create. So what is application we can create? Something like license and organization. So the big one we can provide LO. Okay, so license and organization we are providing. So because of this, I am trying to providing LO, and you can add a commit message. schema updated. Okay, so commit the changes. Now what I will do, we'll coming back to the data source. So instead of public schema, so we are going to create a new schema, LO, license and organization. Now we created. So now what I will do, again I'm going to run the application service. So the data objects are created, tables are created, but some different exception we are getting here. Now you can see, so license table is created under this particular LO. So LO is nothing but we provided as a schema. Okay, so license or organization schema we provided, table is created. So sequence also is created. But now we get the different exceptions. So creating a controller with the help of this particular B name called license controller, we got some different exception. We'll identify this. Coming back to this, so could not create the query. Okay, so find organization license ID. So we are getting some query related exception. No property found. It's like a JPA related exception here. Okay, so JPA related exception we could not identify. Now what we can do basically, so we'll try to create the JPA related example. Now let me create this particular JPA related one. How we can create this particular JPA related one? So here we can go for this particular repository we created and find by organization. It is not providing, right? Okay, because of that I think we could not get the data. Okay, so first we'll insert and later we can identify the loading data. Go back to the license service. So this is not we used here. Okay, this is we used here. So license and so it is wrong basically. Now modified the method. Okay, let me run one more time and do license ID. Okay, so same exception we are getting. I go. Yes, no property license ID. Okay, we are having ID only. We don't have a license ID. Just we are having. Okay, not here, right? Repository. Organization ID and ID. Organization ID, string ID. Okay, so again I'm trying to recreate. Okay, so env dot property. So this is the env dot property. Maybe here we provided example dot property. So env dot property is equals to something like so default environment. So env property configuration. Okay, so here if you observe carefully, I'm trying to modify the changes in the configuration server, but I'm not stopping the what we can call configuration service here. So just I modify the file, but even though the service is still running, again I'm trying to run the business service. Basically, license service is one of the business service. So here we are going to implement the business related functionality. So now you can see application is started. Our license service application is started. Okay, so this is the way of creating this particular example. Now, from where the data is loaded? The data is downloaded from the GitHub repository. One link we created. So nowadays they are trying to communicate with application. Another property comes something called so console. So this is so using this particular console, they are trying to providing the property files here. Getting the point. So we'll identify how we can identify using this particular console later. Basically, using the console, whatever the property we are we are trying to providing, this is the way of writing this particular property here. Okay, the console it is trying to download in the server. So from the server we are going to create the different files here. Okay, with the help of this particular different files, we are going to communicate here. So one more example, we'll see how we can use this particular console related. But console is similar to the GitHub. So same way. But here we are trying to get the default property file. Same thing you can create with a multiple property file with the environment here. Okay, so now what I will do with the help of this particular 8080, I'm going to hit the same URL. So whatever the URL we are having, I'm trying to hit this. But you can see so response is 200, but we could not get the data because no data is available in the database. So if you see here, so license related query is generated. Okay, here you can see license related query is generated and default environment. So whatever the default environment we provided, this is the default environment. From where it is trying to load, this is trying to load from this is a message. Getting the point. But this property file we created under the GitHub repository. Now using this particular GitHub repository, we connected the application using the first configuration service, and with help of this particular license service, again we are trying to communicate with the configuration service to load the database related properties here. Okay, so tomorrow we'll insert the data into the license object. Again, we'll try to hit this particular same endpoint to load the same data here. Okay, so to communicate these two services, now what we are doing it, the configuration is very important here. First one, inside the application.properties, so this is the import we are trying to providing here. So this particular import, it will try to communicate with this particular configuration service. And inside the configuration service, we provided the GitHub repositories here. Okay, any questions on this regarding this particular configuration service as well as our license service here? Okay, so tomorrow we'll identify with help of this particular dev environment to prod environment how we can identify with a different example here. So this is very important example we are discussing it because this is the format, like this is the structure we are going to follow in real time microservices applications here.
Where can I get the recorded video of this?
Okay, I will give you the link. So just message me in the WhatsApp. I will give you the link.
Okay. Also the previous recordings also.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we'll continue tomorrow with the continuation of this particular license service here.